Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beard Bros Media Network. I'm Cassie Tomaselli, the host of Big Ideas in Cannabis. And normally we're over a Zoom screen recording this show, but today we are in the amazing Hardeen Dispensary podcast studio with Hardeen's Chief of Staff, Marc Hauser.
Hi, nice to meet you. Or nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. And I just have to say, your staff is so amazing because they came together and put together all of the technicalities to get us up and running today. And they are so kind and smart and sweet. And I just have to give you so many kudos for that.
I'm lucky to be working with them. This is the best team in the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today we want to talk about, in Big Ideas in Cannabis, this notion of a portfolio career. And that's really something that you have built over the years, Marc, over the many years now that we've known each other.
Yeah.
And I really just want to explore that idea. But first, I really want to just have everyone in the audience learn a little bit more about you and your legal background and everything like that. So why don't you just give everybody a quick primer?
Great. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I like talking about myself. I love talking about this industry. So it is. I'm a lawyer. Lawyers just like talking about what they do. So, or I was a lawyer. So I started out. I did my undergrad in law school at Northwestern. I started out practicing doing lending and securities and corporate. Then went in-house to spend 15 years working with a Chicago-based investor in his family office, getting his corporate deals done. The biggest, we worked on a $9 billion leveraged buyout of the Tribune Company. It was the biggest deal I will ever have touched. And we've worked in a lot of different asset classes, did lots of tax strategy. It was an education in itself. And even though I was the lawyer, I worked with a team of investment bankers and investors and really got an education in finance and capital markets and getting deals done. After 15 years, we needed to change. We got tired of Chicago weather, and we moved out to Napa, California. And I joined a wine law firm. Yes, it is paradise.
Absolutely.
And I joined a wine law firm because I needed, I always loved wine. It was always my first love. But early on, this is about 7 years ago, I was given a piece of work in the cannabis space on the corporate side. And I realized that it was new at the time. California had just gone adult use, but it was still a very early time in the industry. This was around 2017 or so, and it was still the Wild West, but in California, some would say it still is. And I don't want to cast aspersions on my colleagues in the cannabis bar, but I met a criminal defense lawyer who was doing a Series A capital round, and I thought that is just this is wrong. And so I started building a network, and with a focus on my background in raising capital and getting deals done, and advising. And I didn't focus so much on regulatory because there's a lot of great lawyers already doing regulatory. I focused on the sort of corporate and business aspects of the industry. I built a great network that I couldn't take advantage of at a small law firm, a wine law firm out of Napa, and so I joined a big law firm, Reed Smith, a global behemoth of a firm that had a small cannabis practice, but at the time was one of the few big firms that was willing to do work in it. And so I joined them and came to go ahead, and I eventually led the practice, and we were ranked as by peer ranked as one of the top firms in the industry, alongside some of our other competitor but peer firms, and I built a great network throughout the U.S. From other lawyers and focused on bankers and lenders and equity sources, funds, really sort of taking advantage of the knowledge base that I created at under the tutelage of Sam Zell. That was the investor. I forgot to name him, in his office. And and leverage that into this space. Right. I did that for 3 years, but then after 24 years of practice, I was done. I honestly never really liked being a lawyer, but I did it for a long time.
I can't believe that.
Well, it's a bad job. I mean, let's just be honest. It is not a good job. And, with all due respect to, the other lawyers out there, most of whom would probably agree with me. It's a really hard job because it's, at heart, you can't be wrong. And there's no tolerance for error. And there are very few jobs where there's just no tolerance for error. And I just didn't like that aspect of it. But I liked the advisory part of it. I liked helping people solve hard problems. And so I started up a consulting business, Hauser Advisory, but with a focus on transactions and major sort of corporate events and restructuring. But at the time, I was also working with part-time with Hardin. They were a client of mine, and just to sort of help them out with some of the bigger projects they were working on. And then last year, they, a lot of opportunities sort of came about with Hardin, and I talked to Adam Cohen, our founder, and who's also an ex-lawyer, and went full time. And now I'm chief of staff, so I don't practice anymore.
Right.
And God willing, I won't ever practice law again. But chief of staff lets me leverage a lot of the knowledge base that I created as a lawyer. It's a very much an advisory role, and in making sure that the major projects and the growth aspects of this business are getting done.
Absolutely.
And just help the executive team make thoughtful decisions.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk more about some of the specific ways that you're able to do that. But first, I want to just talk about, you've used so much of this background to really craft this niche for yourself, and you've also been able to generate not just, a job with Jardine, but you've also kind of created these other opportunities for yourself in the space, and it's a way that we would kind of call it like a portfolio career. And we're all kind of trailblazing our way in this industry, and that's really an amazing way to do it that I've found. And so could you just maybe describe to us, how would you define a portfolio career in the cannabis industry?
I think it is, it's finding a way to not just have your job, but finding ways to be, a resource and involved in a lot of different things. And that can mean a lot of things for everybody. I mean, it's different how you want to do that. But it's being involved in the industry. It's making yourself a presence, not just in your day-to-day job, but in helping the business and the industry succeed, whether that's on the grassroots side in advocacy, or it's on the business side. What I did was I focused early on networking.
Right.
I mean, that's really how I sort of built my career in this industry, was just very aggressive networking. Not aggressive as being a nudge all the time, but just getting out there as much as possible. I'm very much an introvert. I'm very, very introverted. And if I had my choice, I would be curled up on a couch in my house 24/7, reading a book or doing crossword puzzles or not thinking about anything. That is my happy place. But I came to learn early on that there is and there still is just a dearth of good flow of information in this industry. And everybody, as a new industry, it's been licensed now for what I call it a decade throughout the U.S. I mean, it's ish. There's not a ton of information flow.
Right.
There's a lot of great reporting out there. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work. But it's hard to still get that, and a lot of people aren't connected in that way. So as a lawyer, I started to really just try to, give my perspective to people, meet with people, and also connecting them. And one of the great things about this industry is people are very open to making introductions, making just blind
That's so
introductions.
True.
Yeah, and to me, it's a very West Coast thing. East Coast is, coming from the finance industry, people, particularly on the East Coast in New York, they're very tight with their network and very tight with their connections, and it's a lot harder to get somebody to make an introduction for you because there's, people are much more protective. Whereas on the West Coast, that sort of Silicon Valley attitude of just, meet this person and making introductions because, it's just a different ethic towards it. And one's not necessarily better than the other. I mean, there's downsides to that, and sometimes you get inundated with too many introductions. It's sort of the ethic of this industry and the spirit of this industry. If we're all in this together, and so I started out really just being very open and just trying to connect as many people as possible to resources and ideas and what are they looking for. And then, the other way I got into that was I did some speaking gigs here and there, but the way I eventually sort of built that was with my newsletter.
That's right. And we're going to talk about that because, you've done that not just with your newsletter, but also with teaching.
Yes.
But first, I really want to dig into this idea of chief of staff a little bit more with you because it's a title that we don't hear of. So how do you leverage all of that experience and expertise, not as a practicing lawyer, but as someone who's kind of advising this company in this very unique way? If you could just talk to me more about, you were saying, it kind of helps the executive team make really well-rounded decisions. So like what might be an example of that?
Yeah, it's a funny title. And in part I chose it with Adam, our CEO, because it was hard to figure out what exactly, where I kind of fit in, because I'm not an operations person necessarily. I just don't come from that background. Our COO and our director of operations that's their job. But so we were trying to think of what was a particular advisory position where I would be, and I gave it some thought and did some research, and chief of staff kind of made sense because the traditional chief of staff role is to make sure that the CEO's priorities are being executed, and then making sure and being sort of an advisor to the management team, being a little bit of a whisperer to the CEO, making sure the communications are flowing, and making sure that projects are getting done, major projects, whether that's the CEO's projects or the management team's projects, and making sure that everything is moving forward. Coming from a deal background, a lot of getting deals done is air traffic control.
That's so true.
Yeah, and it's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of parties, a lot of inside and outside parties, and the lawyer sort of oversees the deal, and making sure that the business team and the lawyers and the accountants and the tax folks and the underwriters and whomever are all coordinating to get to a goal. And so when you're in a growth mode, in business, business development, in major projects, whether you're expanding to another state or acquiring another company or, or taking on capital, those are projects that have a timeline, and need somebody who can oversee that and make sure that everybody else is getting everything done. The genius and the beauty of the chief of staff job is I don't have to do any of that work. I just have to make sure other people are doing that work. That's the part I like doing.
Absolutely. You're holding that mental space for all of these projects.
Yeah. But I don't need
really
to be
important.
the one at 5 o'clock on a Friday getting the email saying, I need this by Monday. I don't miss that at all.
No, because I'm sure that was the world you lived in, constantly on call. And so what is it about Hardin that really drew you to this company? You just gave me a beautiful dispensary tour. Tell me a little bit, or tell everybody listening a little bit about what you told me about just a little bit earlier.
Hardin is it's a pretty special place. And, it sounds a little trite, and you hear from a lot of people that they're unique. If I had a dollar for everybody told me they have the best flower, I'd be a very rich man. But I'm not a rich man. But it's unique in that our founder really wanted to build a company and a brand that one of the things they do is sell cannabis. He didn't build this to be a cannabis company or a cannabis brand. He built this with a very specific focus on what is the brand aesthetic, and how is it going to appeal to people, and who are the people it's going to appeal to. and trying to find that balance of being within the subculture or culture, the cannabis culture, which is very important to the industry, because you need that in order to gain credibility with the folks that have been in it a long time. But also having the other foot outside of that.
We have to bring more people in.
Right. I mean, that's one of the problems, I think, and I've written about this a lot, is that the industry is having trouble sort of bringing more people into cannabis.
Yeah.
Whether it's the form factors, whether it's the aesthetic, there's that's a whole nother conversation. But, what we've tried to do here is sort of bridge that gap and create an aesthetic that really appeals to everybody. It's inviting, it's exciting, it's glamorous, it's got that sort of Vegas vibe to it, that comes through when you walk into the dispensary. It comes through in our merchandise. It comes through in our marketing. And we use a lot of influencers and rap stars and DJs and people to sort of get that brand aesthetic out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, kudos to your team, who have been nothing but wonderful since I've gotten here today. You mentioned a little bit too about how you really love to teach and to educate and to provide resources for a lot of these businesses that don't have your corporate and finance background, because it's so true. A lot of people come to this industry and they don't have that experience. They come because they have a passion for it, or they have a really compelling story, or maybe they just have a focus in another area of business. So one thing that you've done with your Cannabis Musings newsletter, which is absolutely a must read for the industry.
Search Substack for Cannabis Musings.
Yes, absolutely.
It's free.
We're going to have to plug it.
Yeah.
And I've been reading it now for years. And one of the things that I think about your newsletter and I want you to kind of give us the primer of it in a second, but I find it to be so approachable, because I started reading it before I even went to business school. And, so all of these concepts, you just did such a great job of explaining, what are these deals that are going on in the industry, and what does the federal regulatory landscape look like, and how it intersects in all of these ways. And you still keep it short and sweet and timely, and you really stayed regular with it. So can you just kind of explain for the audience that may not be familiar with your newsletter, what it is, how you started it, the whole story?
So it started about 6 years ago. It was pretty early on when I was in the industry. I was seeing a lot of crazy, dumb things happening. This would have been about 2017, 2018 at this point. I don't even remember the dates, because I unfortunately don't have those early musings anymore. But I wanted to just sort of like give my perspective on something. And so it started as just an email to my contact list, which was completely illegal, because I didn't get any opt-in. But
with the Spam Act. Okay,
we won't talk about that. The statute of limitations is probably passed on that. So, but I was thinking about what would be the tone of it, what would be the style, and I thought, nobody ever really wants to read what a lawyer writes. A lot of most of the content that comes out from lawyers is very dry. It's extremely technical. It's very dense, and it's really only approachable if you're a lawyer, like an in-house lawyer. Yeah. It is extremely, extremely specific. It rarely has like actionable takeaway from it. It never is almost never is a perspective. When it does have a takeaway, it's still really hard to sort of like figure out, what do I do with this, especially as a non-lawyer. So I decided to approach it as, I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to keep it very high level. Sometimes I'll go in a very deep dive into something, but still not get too technical. Explain all the jargon. Try to make it sound like a business person and not a lawyer. And try to keep it funny. And it is really hard to be funny in these things, because it's something about law and business and finance and in weed. And so but my muse for this is Matt Levine with his money stuff art.
That's a great newsletter.
It's genius. He has a similar background. He was a lawyer. He practiced at Wachtell, which is one of the, there's sort of like a storied boutique in corporate law and M&A. He then went to work for Goldman Sachs and sold. He was in the derivatives and secured structured products. That's it. He was in the structured products group, but then he started blogging for Dealmaker, and then eventually was picked up by Bloomberg. And so he has what I think is the best finance newsletter out there. It comes out daily.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
It does. He achieves this amazing balance of having this. He brings such a wealth of knowledge and sort of really distills what is going on. And he's extremely good at explaining what is going on before he then gets to the point. So there's a lot of build up to it, but he's also really funny because he's very tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And he both loves his subject, but also likes to make fun of it a little bit.
That's true.
And it's a tough balance, because you don't want to be seen as sort of a fanboy or fangirl for the industry and just, slather all over it. So, because you can't really be a good critical thinker about it if you're just praising it all the time. But you can't be too harsh because A, you don't want to piss anybody off, but B, then it comes off as just, it turns people off. And it's hard to really sort of teach something or get a point across if you're mean about it. So it's a really hard balance. And so, but I tried to and early on I was very snarky in my writings, and it was, and it kind of deserved it. The industry, there's a lot of just, dumb use of capital very early on, and a lot of just like this is all going to turn out poorly. And unfortunately, I was right with a lot of it, but it was, but it wasn't. That's not the point. Is that it kind of needed like a critical eye. But at the same time, I love this industry, and I really want it to succeed. And I see the long-term, growth in this industry, even if in the short term, I think it's still something of a dumpster fire. And it's finding that balance to send that message. So the humor in it comes from, I use a lot of Yiddish. Because Yiddish, I'm Jewish, and Yiddish is a funny language. And it's got a lot of funny phrases. It's got a lot of funny words. I think the first time I ended up using it was, or sort of getting into that was, I was trying to describe the FDA's rules about when the CBD, hemp was legalized by the Farm Bill in 2018. And CBD came about, and hemp-derived CBD, and it was all these products. The FDA immediately said, no CBD, no hemp-derived CBD in food or beverage, period. And so to explain this, I came up with the idea of CBD-infused knishes, because knish is a funny food. It's a in case you don't know, it's like a pastry filled with potato with a lot of salt and pepper and sometimes a brisket mixed in. They're delicious with mustard, and a Dr. Brown's cream soda, and it's heaven. And so and then I talked about a knish truck, a CBD infused knish truck, and so the knish truck, as has been sort of this like this straw man for this or structure or conceit, that's the right word, for explaining ideas. And then then I started to drop in a few Yiddish phrases or words here and there, and then I got some phrase books, and now it's sort of like a thing. But it helps with making a point, and it helps keep it readable. So I try to do about 1,000 words a week. Sometimes it's every other week. Every once in a while I'm struggling to find what to write about, but then the industry, because it's cannabis, gifts me something stupid has happened, or something amazing has happened, and I'm able to write about it. It's great. And so it's like it just happens by from heaven or something. I don't know. But
That's amazing.
But I like it because it allows me to have a voice. It allows me to give a perspective and sort of teach people what is going on here, and I mean, like recently with what happened with GTI and Ben Culver, they invested some money into Agrify.
That's right.
And it was a big mystery. Like, why are they investing into Agrify? And and the speculation was, GTI is going to uplist with this, and so I was, so I thought about it. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense because they could just ask the Nasdaq to do that. And so I wrote about to explain what everybody is chattering about on on X and Reddit and all that, and in conversations, LinkedIn, it's like, no, that's not the reason. Here's why. I don't know why they're doing it, but it's not for that reason. And then they, it turns out that they then did an offering, and they bought or they entered into an agreement to buy this. I'm forgetting the name, but a hemp drinks business. And so then I talked about that, and tried to give some perspective as to like why that's kind of weird, but it could also be kind of genius, or it's a really bad idea. And just sort of give people a little bit of context of like to help figure out these problems, and to point out both the good and the bad about it. And it's and so it's been great because even though now I used to use it to market myself and my services both as a lawyer and consultant, now I have a full-time job, and so I don't really need to do that, but it keeps me involved. It forces me to constantly be looking at what's going on in the industry, and it keeps me out there. And so I'm constantly engaging with my readers.
Yeah.
I'm having conversations with them. I'm meeting new people all the time. I mean, even walking around, into places during MG BizCon,
yeah.
I'm getting to see people, and and they're saying, "Oh, I love your musings," and we'll have a conversation about something I've written about, and I learn something from those people, and it gives, sometimes I get a new perspective on something, and that helps me with my job, but it also helps me with as I'm writing in the future. What are new topics? What are different ways to think about a problem?
Yeah, and what do people care about?
What do people care about? Exactly. So it's a good way I found it to be a really good way to sort of get my name out there, and be relevant within the industry. But also, it's enriching for me because it really helps me understand this crazy business.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. They say, the best way to learn is actually to teach. And
yeah,
so,
that's true. Yeah,
it really helps solidify these concepts that you study and muse about all the time. Yeah. I should have made that Matt Levine connection earlier, that you were so inspired by that newsletter. Yeah. As soon as you said it, like a light bulb went off. But, tell me a little bit about your subscriber base. Like, who subscribes to it? Do you find that it's a lot of smaller operators or other attorneys, or what does it kind of look like?
I honestly don't know anymore, and I think that's a good thing because I've got a lot of subscribers. I think I'm up to about 2,500 at this point.
And that's just organically.
That's just
over the years.
Yeah.
You haven't really advertised it or anything like
that.
Just
people have sort of discovered it. I cross-post it to LinkedIn and then get through that. And it's a lot of sharing and a lot of just sort of referrals from other newsletters. But it is, and a lot of that growth's been since I've been on Substack. Now, I mean, of course, I will say, only a handful of those people actually pay me for it, and that's another thing to talk about is do I monetize it in any way? But it has, early on, I knew every single person who subscribed, and up until a couple of hundred, as I met new people, they got added to the list, and so I really knew my subscriber base, and it was very focused within my network of lawyers and bankers and and funds and investors and like. Then when I went to Reed Smith, it went onto their blog, so it got a little more diverse there, and it got some more traction from that. I also lost a little bit of control from that. I could no longer be too snarky on it. They wouldn't allow that. But I also learned to be a little more. To not really sort of call anybody out in particular.
Right.
It was part of their sort of just writing standards, which I think ended up being a good thing because, I think I said it before, I don't want to piss anybody off. This industry is way too small. And even there's a lot of people in this industry who do a lot of dumb things. And I would love, to talk, just say, but I try to avoid that. I try to find other ways to sort of highlight it without calling out, a specific company or specific person by name.
Yeah.
But then to get back to your question is, once I left the law firm, I sort of had to recreate it because they're lawyers. They wouldn't let me keep that old content posted because they're evil. And so, I eventually shifted it to Substack, but I was allowed to keep the subscriber base. And so I brought all those people to Substack, and since then it's really exploded.
Right, because you can recommend other newsletters when you sign up for something. So if somebody's subscribing to a cannabis newsletter or somebody else's, you'll probably be recommended yours.
That's right. So it seems like every day I'm picking up 1 or 2 new subscribers.
Right.
And so I'll always look and see, like, is it a company or a name or something that I've noticed? But it's kind of fascinating. Like, I probably only recognize the domain names maybe 5% anymore of my new subscribers.
Oh,
which is great, because it's getting my voice out there to people that I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, it's funny, but it's another way to just sort of, of being relevant and helping to add to this industry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One thing when you were talking about calling out others and things like that, it's something I've had to think about a lot as a former journalist in this space of being very fair. And there was one phrase that I heard recently that I've really been like taking with me in everything that I do now that I've kind of been on the other side of it, is always to be hard on the problem and soft on the person. And I think that's the way that you approach it now.
I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. I'm not a reporter. Whereas I know a lot of the reporters in this industry, and they're doing some great work, but it's also their job to be a little more focused on a specific, company or person, because they're reporters and they're reporting on an actual incident or event.
You have to look at it from a 30,000 foot view always. It's not personal, but you have to report on what's happening.
Right. Yeah. And I guess even in that role, though, I get why you're saying, like, if as a reporter, you're not unless you're doing an op-ed, some sort of editorial piece, which can be more specific. I get why you want to take that approach. But I definitely don't, and I know you weren't saying this, but I definitely don't sort of think of myself as a reporter. I think of myself more as a pundit, or or
absolutely.
dare I say, public intellectual.
Oh.
I don't know about that, but you can't be an intellectual in cannabis. So we're talking about weed, but I think that's right. It is the right approach, because I want the industry to be better. I want it to improve. It is better than it was 7 years ago. I don't see as many breaches of fiduciary duties. I think a lot of the truly bad actors have sort of, fallen out of the industry that I've seen. There's always going to be there in any industry. But, a part of what I'm trying to do is just call out certain things, certain problems that, if we could collectively as an industry just get better at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there's another way that you've been using your expertise that I really want to talk about, is you've been teaching at your alma mater.
Yes.
Tell me all about that.
So that's been a lot of fun. It started 3 years ago, I think now, and I was approached by a professor at Northwestern Law that they have a program for law students the school is in Chicago, but they had begun this program in San Francisco where second and third year law students could come out, and I think it was for 10 or 12 weeks. They would intern at Bay Area tech companies, VC firms, and the like, and then at night take some classes. Bit of a boondoggle, but which I would have loved to have done it. But it was, but they're getting these cool like opportunities to, to be on the ground at these amazing companies in the Bay Area. And they, the classes they were teaching were like venture capital law and sort of basic securities and investment, biotech, IP, and tech IP and the like. And the professor who runs it decided they wanted to add a cannabis law class because it's the Bay Area. And so they reached out to me and two of my two other alums from the law school who I knew very well and are friends of mine. And so the three of us taught a class over the period. So we put together a curriculum. And it turns out that one of them, Rebecca Stamey White, who's a close friend of mine, amazing regulatory lawyer in cannabis and alcohol beverage in San Francisco, also went to undergrad in law at Northwestern like me. She was the one who gave me my first piece of work in the cannabis industry.
Oh,
which
so
made
full
even
circle.
better. Yeah, it was fun to then be able to teach a class with her.
Yeah.
So we put together this curriculum and taught it, and then last year we pared it down to some, but we again taught a seminar in cannabis law. We're scheduled to do it again this coming term or whatever. So, and I've been able to leverage that. I've been talking to another law school about possibly teaching there for next summer. So it's been a lot of fun to be able to sort of take that knowledge base, and sort of synthesize and then figure out how do I teach other people with this, and keep it interesting. And what I like to tell them is to sort of relish the fact that you're getting to work on something that's completely illegal. As a lawyer, that's just weird, but in a fun way. I mean, because you don't get that opportunity ever as a lawyer. But you're also getting opportunity to sort of help build a new industry.
That's right. I was just going to ask, where do you even start building that curriculum?
Yeah.
And I think putting that on the first slide is
Yeah. Actually, what we decided, we started it with a clip from Saturday Night Live, which has to do with in New York City, where they announced that possession is no longer illegal, and all these people come out onto the street and sort of like merging from the light with weed, and they're all in the streets. And then the cops stop them and they say, "Well, you can't smoke it." And it's this great moment. It's a great punchline. And
it just explains the nuance so perfectly.
That's exactly right. We then walk
Everything
through
is
that
nuance.
video, and it's like the entire class is like captured in this one bit.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. I mean, even have like the stoner dude eating Funyuns. It was spot on. So,
Oh my gosh.
It's great.
Do you find that your students are very surprised about the things that you share about, banking access and some of the changing regulatory?
Yeah, they are, because it's such a it's so different, because law is it's nuanced, but it's fairly straightforward, and there is a logic to most of it. At least when you're learning it in law school, there's a very defined logic to it, and there's a lot of rationality to how you arrive at a decision, or how you arrive at a law. And cannabis, none of that matters. And I made this comment, I use this a lot in my musings, is that cannabis suffers from what I refer to as the quantum duality of cannabis, which is that it's illegal and highly regulated at the same time. And that is behind every problem in cannabis.
Right.
And so you have to sort of think about cannabis law, and we try to teach this through that lens of like how do you have to approach every problem through both of those filters, which is not intuitive when you are when you're learning how to practice law. And so a lot of the things that in operating in the industry nothing makes sense. And another thing I always say is that when you're bringing knowledge, you're coming into the industry, you can't adapt cannabis to the way things work elsewhere. You have to take what you know and adapt it to cannabis. It's sort of, you have to flip it backwards. And it's the same thing with law, is that what you would expect should work and makes rational sense, whether it's a decision a regulator is going to make, or a court is going to make, or even just the way a regulation works. You can't expect it to just be the way, it's like, well, that makes rational sense. There are a few other areas of law where that happens, like tax, but it's cannabis is, you just have to approach it a very different way.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of fun. I mean, that's sort of the creativity of it, and trying to teach that. And I try to get that through in my musings too, making the point that you can't think about this rationally, particularly when it comes to policy in this industry and federal policy, and what kind of makes sense as to what the federal government should be doing or what a state government should be doing. It doesn't matter. It's it just is, and we have to try to find other ways to solve those problems.
Absolutely. That is so true. You have
Yeah.
to act as if it's never going to happen. That's
Right.
the conversation
That's
I feel like I've been
exactly
having
right.
with people all week at BizCon, is that we just have to operate as if it's never going to happen, and just make sure that we're operating a tight ship and doing what we need to do to survive. It's crazy to think that people could be studying cannabis law, like they could be going up through law school thinking that they want to be a cannabis lawyer instead of like stumbling into it as so many others have.
It's really true, and it's a little exciting. I mean, I was not the first person in cannabis law, that's for sure. There's a lot of folks who were pioneers of it and really sort of brought it up there. But I'd like to think that I was part of that first wave, and that now, students are, people are starting out, and there's cannabis law isn't necessarily its own thing. It's part of a broader, practice area. But people can sort of go into their, start out with an eye towards, I want to get into this industry.
Right.
And so, but the other thing too, they can also learn, and, I've learned, is you don't need to be a lawyer forever. And that there's, it's amazing the way your career takes turns. Law firms and law really do a good job of making lawyers think that they're incapable of doing anything else. And we're risk averse by nature.
Right.
It's just the way we're taught, because again, we can't be wrong, and we're taught to avoid risk at all costs, which is impossible in this industry. And so as a lawyer, that's really hard to do, and so you have to adapt to that. And so, it's a matter of then finding what is the path you want to take from that. So.
And you've certainly found a path through that, and one through servitude. That was something that, when you said it earlier, resonated, was that when you're thinking of having a portfolio career, it's like, how can I serve different groups of people? Like, how can I be the resource? So that kind of leads me to my last question, which is, if somebody's, I feel like a lot of people approach this industry as they're looking for one gig, and they're looking for their dream gig, and there's a lot of turnover in this industry, and there's a lot of instability in this industry. Have you found that a portfolio career has kind of helped you balance some of those things?
It has, because it's such a hard industry, as we all know, and it doesn't seem to me like it's going to get that much better anytime soon. It is moving in the right direction. But it's not going to get fundamentally easier, 3 months from now. You need to be as adaptable as possible. It doesn't feel like we have this sort of the whiplash that we did 6 or 7 years ago.
That's true.
A lot of the state regulations have settled down, and it's a lot less sort of, not quite as much, crazy change as there was. That's good and bad. But a lot of things don't work, and a lot of things don't work out. And, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of good people just sort of say, I'm done. And
leave entirely.
And I respect that, because this is a really, really, really hard industry. And, and you need to have an incredible amount of patience and tolerance for pain in order to get through it. We all know that.
There has to be some Yiddish term to describe this.
It's Freigewalt. I mean,
Thank you.
Like, this is such a life, and so, you just need to be adaptable, and it's great because you learn people's stories, and in this industry, and everybody has just done such interesting things, whether it's they came from the legacy industry and sort of adapted to that and found other ways to make things work. I met somebody earlier today who had been growing since they were a teenager, and and then moved into the license industry, then went into I think it was packaging, and then worked for a vape company, and now is consulting. And so finding different ways to bring your skill sets to bear, in a lot of different areas, and there's so many different areas to make this industry work. Or a good friend who is, who was a lawyer by training and helped build up law in a state, and then went in house, and then went into government affairs, and then is now went into consulting and is now CEO of a startup. And so it's like it's just finding different ways to find your path, and realizing that I mean, this is such a high risk industry, and other than the lawyers, everybody has a very high tolerance for that risk. So it's taking advantage of that, and realizing that I need to take a lot of risks in this industry because it's still so new, and I need to and it's not going to be necessarily that easy to find where do I fit.
Absolutely. So what would you say to somebody who is like thinking about maybe having a side hustle of their own in this industry or something like that? Like, do you have any advice for someone who's looking to just expand their network a little bit through that?
Well, my first response would be, are you really sure? Really? Do you like pain? Do you like banging your head against the wall? Do you like not sleeping at night? I mean that sort of half seriously. I would actually, I would talk to them about the good and the bad of this industry, because I think that a lot of folks come into this industry thinking that everybody's making money, it's really easy, and I'm going to dominate it. Like I
the
know
amount of
something,
times I've heard that.
I know. Like I know something that everybody else is doing it wrong. It is, and it's slightly insulting to hear that. There's some truth to it though too. It's not totally wrong, because
that's true.
There's still a lot of people not doing a lot of good. There's still a lot of bad practices in this industry, and there's
just
still a lot
opportunity for newness,
and that too. Yeah, and in the positive way.
Yeah.
Even if it comes off as a little too self-assured, but with that, I think it would be getting to know your local trade groups. Starting to just meet people.
One. Yeah.
Going to smaller and bigger events. I mean, there's so many networking events in this industry. I mean, arguably there are too many conferences in this industry. There's so many conferences in this industry, but again, I would say a lot of those are focused on people who are newer to it. And so getting involved in those, meeting people, just talking about what they do, and because everybody likes talking about this industry because it's so hard, and everybody wants to share information and share what they've done wrong in order to help everybody win.
That's true.
I really think that most people in this industry are like that.
I agree. We like sharing our mistakes.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a very collaborative industry. Because it's so hard, because it's so new, and we all just want to make it work, big and small. I mean, and that's what I love about it too. And so I think it really is. I mean, there's a lot of online resources such as Cannabis Musings, but there's and there's a lot of other great newsletters to learn about what's going on, and new sites and everything. It's just learning that and getting to know the people. And visiting dispensaries and talking to your bud tenders.
Yeah, I think so too. And the thing that I tell people also, it's like whether you want to enter this space as like a side hustle to your outside the cannabis job, or you just want to diversify within this space, there's so many different ways that cannabis intersects with like our previous life. It's like there's media, there's technology, there's science, there's chemistry, there's law, there's tax, accounting. I mean, no matter how where you come from, like you can find a space here, and you can and because it's so new, you can carve a niche here, which is what I think you've done so well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's true. The last thing I'd say too is respecting the subculture and understanding that there is a very specific culture to cannabis, which can be hard to fully understand. I've been in this 7 years now, and I was saying to somebody earlier today, which makes me both a veteran and a newbie at the same time. Like
I feel that way a lot.
It's very weird. But it's and it's and I didn't come from the culture, but I've come to learn it. It's there's a jargon to it like any other industry. There is an attitude about it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And there's an aesthetic to it, and it's coming to understand that cannabis. One thing that makes cannabis different from a lot of other industries is that people really expect that you respect that subculture. In order, they want that authenticity from the people working in it, which is why I think a lot of people who've come into it trying to say, I'm going to dominate this, and they fail to respect that subculture. And also, I mean, I'll say with like certain celebrity brands, it's the same problem. Like, you know, I'm not going to specify, but like some that come in, but they don't have that sort of grounding within the culture. And so I think that that would be the other thing too, is trying to sort of learn what is it that makes that culture unique, and then learning to you don't need to, you know, change your life around it, but learning to understand that culture and how to sort of operate within it and understand the point of view of the people in it, I think is very important. And it takes time and it takes education. And it's, you know, but they're good people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, what a wonderful note to end on,
Yeah.
Marc. Thank you so much for joining us on
Thank
the
you.
Big Ideas in Cannabis podcast on the Beard Bros Media Network. We'll be listening to this conversation in January, but I just want to wish happy holidays to you since we're here
Thank
at
you,
BizCon
too.
Week. And yeah, if you, I hope you can catch us on LinkedIn, but if you can't, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll catch you next time.